This is Tierah Ruins Things with Science, a podcast about the science of infectious diseases in pop culture. I am Tierah, and I am here to ruin your favorite TV shows and movies by telling you how badly they butchered science. Today I'm going to be talking about the movie Venom and mind-controlling parasites. In Canada, Venom is currently on Netflix and Disney+, and you can also rent it on Google Play, Apple Movies, all of those things. Now, I know Venom wasn't really a box office success, but I loved it. I am a fan of all things Tom Hardy, and yes, that even includes Star Trek Nemesis.
I have a parasite.
Parasite?
If you haven't seen the movie or aren't really a Marvel fan, that's okay. I don't think you need to be a Marvel fan in order to enjoy it, and if you want to keep listening, I do try not to spoil it too much. The main points of the story are that an alien organism is being brought back to Earth on a spaceship, but it escapes, and while they're re-entering the atmosphere, it causes the ship to crash. The organism is recovered and brought back to San Francisco, eventually meeting up with Eddie Brock, an investigative reporter who's looking into some mysterious deaths of unhoused people that he knows. The organism infects Eddie, who begins to suffer from a flu-like illness, and chaos ensues. The organism gives him all these fantastical abilities like invulnerability. He can turn his arms and body into this pliable goo that grabs people and throws them around, helps him climb buildings, etc. It also highly increases his appetite, so the parasite, whose name is Venom, is constantly trying to get Eddie to let him eat people.
You cannot just go around eating anybody that you want to.
I cannot.
So to sum up, this is an organism that can infect a human by crossing directly through the skin without leaving a wound, and is also capable of surviving on its own without a host for a while, including in space. It can take control over your movements and behaviors, make you do things you don't want to do, like maybe crawl into a fish tank in a restaurant and eat a live lobster, but it does also respond to you asking it not to do those things. It can change your dietary preferences, making you crave food you normally wouldn't eat, like I said, raw meat, garbage, even humans. Most people would think this is a parasite, as Eddie does, but Venom himself objects to being called that, and I have to say I agree. I don't think Venom is a parasite per se. To prove my point, let me tell you about parasites and what they're like. This is going to be a bit of a broad whirlwind overview, so just bear with me. In general, when members of two different species have a close relationship like this, where there's some exchange of energy or resources that benefits both parties, it's called symbiotic. And in the movie, Venom is even called a symbiote. There are a few different types of symbiotic relationships. Usually symbiosis refers to something that all or most members of a species engage in, rather than a single individual cooperating and forming a bond in some way with an individual of a different species. So your budgie might be friends with your cat, and they might help each other out in fetching snacks from the counter, but house cats and budgies don't tend to hang out in the wild. Capybaras, though, often form mutually beneficial relationships with birds, like the giant cowbird. The birds will clean the capybara of parasites, like ticks, that attach themselves to the cappy's skin. This benefits the bird as it gets a snack, and since ticks often carry diseases, it protects the cappies. Even if the ticks don't have diseases, they still suck the blood of their victim, and if the tick load is high enough, just their presence, absent of any disease, can be enough to cause serious harm to the mammal's health due to the blood loss. In Canada, this is a particularly bad problem with our moose. Some moose have been found with 80,000 ticks on them, and one report I found said they found up to 150,000 ticks on a single moose. These are winter ticks, and they live on the moose, but they don't carry Lyme disease, so it's more like death by 80,000 paper cuts. Each adult tick can take between 1 to 3 milliliters of blood, so a moose is going to run out pretty quickly, and a capybara even more so. Capybaras have learned that associating with birds benefits them because the birds take care of the ticks. Interestingly, the winter tick that infects the moose can also infect other species too, like bison, but bison engage in a mutualistic relationship with the cowbirds just like the capybaras do, so they don't suffer from tick infections as much as the moose. So I just used the word mutualistic, and that's one type of symbiotic relationship where both participants benefit. Another type of symbiosis is called commensalism, where one partner benefits and the other neither benefits nor is harmed. There's a few easy examples of this. One type of heron follows herds of cattle or horses around and feeds on the small insects that get stirred up as the larger animals walk around. Then you have remora fish, which will attach themselves to or live near large marine animals like sharks and whales. This provides the remora with protection because no other predator is going to sneak up and try to nibble the wee fish off the back of the shark, and the remora feeds on the scraps that the sharks don't eat. Neither the sharks, the cattle, or the horses actually get any real benefit from the remora or the herons as far as I can tell, so these are the definition of commensal relationships. Lastly, we have parasites. A negative symbiosis where one species benefits and the other is harmed or killed. There are 6 general classes of parasites based on how they infect and or reproduce inside their host. So first, parasitoids. This is where the adult parasite lays its eggs inside the body of another species, and then when the egg hatches, the parasite larva eats its way out of the poor victim's body. An example of this is with the Dinocampus coccinelle wasp that lays a single egg inside a ladybug's body. When the larva hatches, it eats up the ladybug's body and then spins a cocoon underneath it, leaving the hard shell behind as protection. If you want to see pictures of this, check the show notes for links. Class 2 is a parasitic castrator, which they're similar to parasitoids. In the castrator type, though, the infected organism doesn't always die, at least not right away. But its ability to produce its own offspring is removed, hence castration, and all the organism's energy is diverted to producing parasite babies. Sometimes this is permanent when the parasites castrate by consuming the gonads and reproductive tissue, and sometimes it's reversible when the parasite simply absorbs all the host's energy without destroying anything, so nothing is left behind to support the organism developing its own offspring until the parasite hatches and leaves. Parasitic castrators can be things like trematodes, which are small leaf-shaped flatworms, copepods, which are tiny little crustaceans that have 2 long antenna-like appendages on their heads, and there are many other species of crustaceans, nematodes, and mollusks that do this, and there are even some dinoflagellates that are parasitic castrators of the copepods. So it's parasitic castrators all the way down, folks. We then have directly transmitted parasites, which are the traditional ones like lice and mites. They jump onto your skin directly. And Giardia, toxoplasmosis, hookworms, roundworms, and tapeworms, which are transmitted by their eggs in feces that get into your food or water or contact your skin. Trophically transmitted parasites, another group, are those that have 2 or more hosts where the first host has to be eaten by the next host for the cycle to continue. That's what trophic means, eating or to do with growth and nutrition. Toxoplasma is also classified here because humans get infected by accidentally ingesting traces of cat poop that has the parasite eggs in it, but cats themselves get infected by eating small rodents where the toxo has created cysts in the rodent's body. Then we have vector-transmitted parasites. They're the last category and contain things like malaria, which is transmitted by mosquitoes. There's babesiosis, spread by ticks, and leishmaniasis and trypanosomes, which are spread by certain flies. So far, the only one of these relationships that sounds like what Venom does is directly transmitted parasites. But let's go a little deeper. Venom does alter Eddie's behavior, and there are parasites that can do this. There's a link in the notes to an article with primary sources on this if you want to read more. First, we have the kamikaze horsehair worm. It's about the size and shape of a piece of cooked spaghetti, and it infects crickets when they eat infected bug larvae in the water. Then, when the worm gets bigger and needs to get back to the water to carry on its life cycle, it does something to the cricket to manipulate its brain. I don't think we know for sure yet, but it's likely through secreting some protein or a neurotransmitter to affect it and make it throw itself into the water so the adult worm can emerge from its body and back into the water. So crickets can't swim, so being in the water and having a worm burst out of it means that the poor crickets don't survive, unfortunately. And then we have the green-banded broodsack worm, which infects snails, and tapeworms that infect copepods. Both of these parasites cause the infected snail or copepod to hang out more where predators will eat them, which then lets the parasite continue its life cycle. Ants really get the short end of the behavior controlling parasite stick. They have fungal parasites and flatworm parasites, all kinds of things that take over their poor little ants and do all manner of horrible things to them. Some just increase their chance of getting eaten, and some cause them to crawl up high on a tree branch so that when they die, their bodies burst and spread parasite goo over a larger area so more ants get infected. A parasite that I've already mentioned, and which you've probably heard of if you've ever owned a cat, is Toxoplasma gondii. Rats and small rodents are infected with toxo, and they lose their fear of the smell of cat urine, and they become attracted to it, so that the cat has a greater chance of catching and eating them. When they do this, the cats ingest the cysts that have formed in the rodent's muscles, which have the developing parasite in it. The cyst breaks open when it's digested, and this allows the parasite life cycle to complete in the cat. Humans can become accidental hosts of toxo if they have or are around cats by accidentally ingesting the toxo eggs in the cat's poop. This is what happens if you don't wash your hands well after emptying the litter box, or if your cat is one of those jerks that likes to go around putting their butthole on things that you will then put in your mouth. There's a lot more I could talk about in regards to toxoplasmosis, but maybe I'll save that for a future episode. This Podcast Will Kill You also did a really good in-depth episode on it as well. They've also done some on some of the other ones I've mentioned, and I'll link to the Toxo episode if you want to listen more. So we know there's at least one parasite, toxoplasmosis, that changes your behavior by changing your smell preferences. There are some parasites that appear to be able to change your dietary preferences too. Some nematodes, which are tiny, tiny worms, they can cause you to produce more of some genes that will help with glucose and lipid metabolism, meaning they would actually improve type 2 diabetes. So when researching this, I came across a lot of pseudoscience bullshit out there where people were trying to complain that parasite infections caused them to crave sugar and lots of high-calorie foods, but there's no good science behind that. Nematode and tapeworm infections usually reduce your appetite while also increasing your metabolism, meaning that people tend to lose weight, not gain it, while they're infected. This is especially harmful in developing nations where there are more people with limited access to proper nutrition anyways. But then to add a parasite in that they don't have treatment for, even though the treatment exists, and it reduces your appetite, it means that the health burdens are much, much greater. Also, some other parasites can cause learned taste aversions in their host, which is just where you tend to avoid foods that you ate when you got sick, just in case it was something in that food that made you feel like shit. Humans do something similar. So think about things like avoiding certain flavors that medicine tasted like that you had when you were a kid, like British people who don't like root beer, or not being able to handle the smell of rum anymore because you drank too much of it and then vomited it all back up. Point being, parasites can change our food preferences, usually by making us avoid certain things, though not really crave them.
Yeah, but you can always just shed my carcass and exchange it for another one whenever you need.
The last aspect of parasite infection that I'm going to talk about is causing bodily changes. In the movie, Venom causes some huge appearance changes to Eddie. When Venom is taking over Eddie, he's taller, much stronger, invulnerable. He can grow extra limbs and seems to have, some sort of digestive system that's like Hermione's beaded bag. It's bigger on the inside than the outside because, it's capable of holding an entire eaten person without distending Venom's body. Now, as far as I know, there are no parasites that turn you into a TARDIS, but there are some that can cause body deformities. There's this one that makes frogs grow extra limbs. The parasite itself is a flatworm, and it invades tadpoles undergoing metamorphosis. This pushes all the developing, changing, and dividing cells around so they don't grow properly or grow in the correct spot. Frogs can have extra legs, missing legs, fused legs. It's really quite a mess. And it's probably quite horrible for these frogs, but again, not really quite what we're seeing what happens with Eddie. All the changes Eddie undergoes are reversible, or they only appear when Venom is taking control. This is why I don't think Venom counts as a parasite. Yes, he needs Eddie to survive, but he doesn't feed on Eddie's blood. Venom doesn't lay eggs in Eddie's body and then consume Eddie's testicles from the inside out. He doesn't create cysts in Eddie's muscles that require a second species to eat Eddie to complete the life cycle. He does alter Eddie's food preferences, but I still don't think he's a parasite. I would classify this relationship as mutualistic. Venom benefits because he has a host to survive in, but Eddie also benefits and experiences improved strength and abilities, and he gains a little courage and self-confidence too. When they first join together, things are a little rough, and Eddie takes a while to tolerate Venom, but this is typical of new mutualistic relationships. Having a commensal or mutualistic partnership start off immediately perfect for both species is, rare or maybe never happens. And for humans, we're used to attacking things that try to invade our bodies, not just tolerating them. Generally, these relationships tend to start off as exploitative because it is in each organism's best interest to contribute as little as possible and take as much as they can get. In nature, mutualistic relationships tend to develop over a longer period of time, and they may start out as intermittent, where two species only cooperate when food sources are low. Sometimes they might start off as parasitic, but where the parasite doesn't harm the host that much, and then evolve to be less and less harmful over time. This is probably the closest parallel to what we see here. So, what Venom is, in my opinion, is a mutualistic space amoeba. Amoebae are not usually mutualistic. They either don't provide benefit or they harm their host, but Venom is from space, so we can accept that he's different. When he's outside of Eddie, he moves like an amoeba. He has an amorphous shape, and he extends what we call pseudopodia, or false feet, to move. There are many free-living amoeba species, actually, but most of them are not harmful. Only 4 genera of amoebae are known to cause disease. One of them you may have heard of is called acanthamoeba, and this causes eye infections called keratitis. And it's mostly in people who wear contact lenses. This is why you should never, ever, ever make your own contact lens solution, even if you use distilled water, because these amoebae are everywhere and they can survive the distilling process. So if you make your own solution and then you put your contact lens in, the amoeba will get jammed against your eyeball, against your cornea by the contact lens and held there for a long time. And then what it does is it just eats your cornea. You will need, specially treated water to make contact lens solution safe. So, just don't make your own at home. There's also an amoeba called Naegleria fowleri, which is also known as the brain-eating amoeba. You may have heard of it in the news. It gets into your brain by eating through the soft palate of your nose. It gets up there if you jump into an infected body of fresh water and the water splashes up your nose really fast, or if you use untreated tap water in your neti pot. So don't do either of those things, or you could get infected with this amoeba and die from encephalitis. They won't know what caused it until after they die because there is no cure. But if you don't get the amoeba shoved up your nose, then it's pretty harmless also. There's one species of giant amoeba I want to mention because I think it's probably the group that Venom would belong to, and that genus is called Chaos. One of the species is called Chaos 2, so it's a giant amoeba called Chaos. They're not pathogenic as far as I can tell, so I thought that would be a fitting classification for Venom. By giant, I mean, it's between 1 and 3 millimeters long. But, most amoeba are small and not visible to the eye, so, that's pretty huge. Alright, and that's all I have for this episode of Tierah Ruins Things with Science. I am a researcher, not a doctor, so please don't take any of this as medical advice. It is for entertainment only. You can follow me on Twitter, if Twitter still exists, at Biology Selfies, and on Facebook at Tierah Ruins Things with Science. I'll put those names and links in the show notes, as well as a link to where you can see all my sources. So thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who helped me bring this podcast to life. I did all the research, writing, and recording myself. The music was written and provided by James Stratton Crawley, and there's a link to his channels in the show notes. He also helped me a bit with the editing. If you have any suggestions for TV shows or movies featuring diseases or pathogens that you would like me to cover, send them in to tierahruinsthings@gmail.com. See you all next time, where I will be talking about the classic 1996 action movie, The Rock, which features the highly toxic VX nerve gas and is one of my very favorite films.